Okay, so the first thing I wanted to talk to you about was explain your experience with Syria. Let's talk about Syria just a little bit. What's your experience with that story?
Well, I had and have no relations with Syria. I was with Iraq against Syria in the split in the Ba'ath Party. I had very few Syrian friends and had visited the country very infrequently. I'm not a supporter, as it happens, of the ruling party in Syria, but why should it be required that I might be? I'm not with Bashar al-Assad. I'm against his enemies. His enemies are much, much worse than him. There are many shortcomings in Syria and some crimes, but nothing by comparison with the head-chopping, heart-eating, merciless Islamist fanatics that have sought now for all these years to overthrow the regime, kill hundreds of thousands of people, destroy churches, break up the multi-confessional, multi-ethnic and very progressive society that Syria is by comparison with other countries in the Arab world. Syria is the kind of place where you can go to an outdoor restaurant on any street, where men and women are sitting together, where those that drink alcohol are drinking it, and where normal relations between men and women and between people of different faiths and different confessions within those faiths can and do get along with each other. Syria is a sophisticated Mediterranean society. The idea that it could be ruled by cavemen, literally cavemen, from the Tora Bora, with their obscurantist, centuries-old take on Islam was always ridiculous and unpalatable. If you think there's a refugee crisis in Syria, if the Islamists had won, 3/4 of Syria would have been on the road as refugees to neighboring countries, and if they could, farther beyond.
And what did you think of the US and the British response to what's happened in Syria?
I think it may be the worst thing that we've ever done, and that's saying something.
Could you just give me that with a full
Yeah. What the British and American governments have done in Syria may be the worst thing that we have ever done, and that's saying something. I'm including Iraq, I'm including Vietnam in that equation. We became the Air Force, the armorer, the financier, and the propagandists of the most primitive, backward, obscurantist people on the planet. We became the armorer and mouthpiece of Al-Qaeda and ISIS in Syria. It's going to be difficult to explain that to future generations.
Okay, let's switch. Let's we talk about the thing you were talking about earlier a bit. How do you see that the left? Where's, and again, give us in a complete sense. Where do you see the left in the anti-war movement right now?
The left in the anti-war movement has been utterly confused over Syria. The far left regarded it as a revolution, and of course, if you say the word revolution, they've got to support it. The liberal part of the left are suckers for the usual buzzwords and hot buttons, one family rule, dictatorship, gay rights, even though in fact the one family rule and dictatorship in Syria is far more advanced on all of these matters than all the dictatorships that we're in bed with, like Saudi Arabia and other places in the Persian Gulf. But it's easy to drum roll and require and get the presence of liberals and leftists when you use these hot button words. The fact that we were acting for people that would have thrown every gay in the country off a tall building, the fact that we were acting for political forces that would strictly segregate men from women in the Saudi or Afghan style seems to have escaped the notice. Even gays in Parliament were supporting the Saudi-backed revolution in Syria. You really couldn't make this kind of stuff up.
And so let's get into the Salisbury thing.
Yeah.
So let me have you just set that up. I'm going to have you set the table
Okay.
on explain what Salisbury was.
Yeah.
Like to somebody who's never heard the story.
Yeah. Well, the Salisbury attack 4 months ago on Mr. Sergei Skripal, a former...
Let me just have you say it again without the 4 months ago, because I don't know this.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. The Salisbury affair, which initially involved an attack on Sergei Skripal, a former British spy acting for Britain inside the GRU, the military intelligence wing of the Russian Federation, who had been exchanged in a spy swap and was living and working, it seems, in Salisbury, in Wiltshire, a quiet part of England, if you disregard all the military-industrial complex plants and bases all around it, was on the face of it inexplicable. It took place 100 days before the beginning of the World Cup, which went on to become a centerpiece of the new Russia's public relations. Took place just days before the presidential election in Russia. Somehow, inexplicably, at that most inopportune time, the Russian state decided to bump off someone they could have bumped off at any time over the last 8-9 years, or could have bumped off far more quietly after those landmark events. It seems that the attack on Skripal accidentally involved his daughter, Yulia Skripal, a Russian citizen who was visiting from Moscow, her father in England. But from the beginning, the state narrative didn't make any sense, leaving aside the very important issue of cui bono, who would benefit from such an attack at such a time. They said that the Novichok, which was the military-grade nerve agent used in the attack, they say, had been applied to the doorknob on the front door of the Skripal house. Again, inherently implausible, because how would you know who would touch the doorknob? How would you know it wouldn't be touched by a passing postman, a passing neighbor? How do you know that Yulia Skripal, rather than her father, would not have pulled the door shut using the doorknob? It fell into further disrepute as a narrative, because such a nerve agent would act within seconds and would be deadly. But both of the Skripals survived the attack, and indeed were not even affected by it until some 5 hours later, and at exactly the same moment. Given their difference in ages, physique, and state of health, this is literally an impossibility. So I never believed that this Novichok, if that's what it was applied in a gel form on their doorknob. I thought it much more likely that it was applied to them seconds before they simultaneously fell down as a result of it. And that theory, my theory, is buttressed by what happened next. What happened next is that 2 junkies, I know you don't like in America that kind of politically incorrect talk, 2 heroin users, in one case also an alcoholic woman living in a homeless hostel, were struck down, the latter, the lady, dying as a result from further exposure to what one must presume was the original batch of nerve agent. It then transpired that this affliction was caused by liquid in a perfume bottle sprayed by the woman on both of her wrists, weeks after they had apparently found that perfume bottle in Salisbury, which has been reduced to a kind of war zone with police and special forces and all the paraphernalia of the state everywhere, streets blockaded, places out of bounds and so on, we're asked to believe that a couple found a perfume bottle in this atmosphere of emergency, took it home, didn't open it, didn't use it for many weeks before finally using it, and in one case falling down dead, in the other case, some again many hours later, falling into acute critical illness. The man has survived it, again calling into question of what this substance actually is. Because I repeat, and as Putin himself said, if this had been Russian military-grade nerve agent, everyone exposed to it would be dead, and quickly. But in fact, 3 of the 4 people who've been exposed to it are still alive.
Now, when you've read editorials or talked to people in your radio show, what's been the reaction of the British public to the Skripal story?
I would say 9 out of 10 British people don't believe the official story. And I think that that is a remarkable testament, both to the failure of the rampant Russophobic red baiting, even though the Russians are no longer red, that has been going on in the British media and from the political class for now at least a couple of years. But it's also a testament to the fact that nobody believes the British state anymore. And that goes back to the Iraq War. Now, even when the British government is telling the truth, they told you it was a hot day today, you'd get your thermometer out to check whether they were telling the truth. And that's a grave crisis for legitimacy in Britain. I believe it's also true in the United States, that nobody believes our rulers anymore, even when they're telling the truth.
Okay, that's great. There you go.
Thanks, mate.
That's it.
Now, did you find the same in Salisbury?
Oh, yeah.
Deep skepticism?
I talked to over a dozen